Hi, welcome to this part of my review featuring Monster Wrangler, the core rulebook. If you haven't seen part 1 of my review, featuring this role-playing game, where you race, train and battle with monsters, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to continue with the setting, starting with the rise of an empire. With the looming threat of starvation serving as motivation, the leaders of Ruma and Majul began making plans to seize control of the neighboring nation of Revara. Revara was unprepared for the Majul onslaught, and in little under 3 months of fighting, a losing one-sided battle, its leaders surrendered to the islanders. The nation's smaller farms were seized by Majul, who brought farming machines with them to more efficiently work the land. As the years passed, Revara became industrialized under the supervision of the newly renamed Majul Empire. The Majul ruled with a light touch, allowing the Revaran subjects a great deal of latitude in how they governed, so long as they paid their tribute on time and did not interfere with the empire's resource gathering. In 356 CR, roughly a decade after Revara's subjugation, Majul began to turn its attention eastward, towards the rural nation of Varsol. The calls to war were loud and frequent enough that they did not go unnoticed by the rulers of Varsol, who weighed their options and realized that they had no hope of defeating the larger and more advanced empire. Rather than see their land plunged into a bloody war, they chose to surrender to the Majul Empire and become part of the empire itself. The small family farms that made up much of the region were consolidated into larger farms under the control of Majul supervisors. The new farming equipment and more efficient farming techniques led to higher produce yields, and the empire was quite happy to sell the excess produce to those nations that had yet to join the empire at a significantly higher cost than they had been paying prior to Varsol's annexation. The nation hit hardest by these price increases was the kingdom of Sargaros, an arid country that, much like the Majul of old, relied upon food imports from Varsol to keep its people fed. The Majul had little interest in Sargaros. Because of that, they were forced to ask Majul if they could join the empire. The Majul had little interest in Sargaros, but the offer was nevertheless accepted in 359 CR. Due to the empire's ambivalence towards the former kingdom, very few restrictions were placed upon Sargaros. Ironically, the taxes demanded by the empire ended up being less than what Sargaros had been paying to import food from Varsol before it became part of the empire. When combined with the technology and machines that were now available to Sargaros as part of the empire, particularly electricity and refrigeration units, it's easy to see why the Sargarosan people held the empire in high opinion later on. The empire's growth had been swift, and all of its victories had been quite decisive. In its arrogance, the empire decided to continue its expansion and attack Armoria, a relatively backwater nation that was only significant in that it served as the only land route to the resource-rich kingdom of Arenza. Wide roads were built leading through the mountains, from Revara and into Sargaros, allowing Majul's mechanical soldiers to reach Armoria's borders. Unlike its previous conquests, however, the Armorian people were prepared for the empire's arrival. While the empire built their roads through the desert, the Armorians captured monsters from the surrounding wilderness and trained them to obey commands. Armoria's so-called monster wranglers fought back ferociously, sending wave after wave of vicious beasts at the mechanized invaders in the first recorded use of monsters being commanded in battle. The Empire launched 4 more invasions of Armoria over the next 15 years, each time bolstering their forces with newer and more deadly machines. These attacks had more initial success than their first attempt, but each one was eventually turned back by Armoria's Wranglers and their trained monsters. Would-be freedom fighters in Revara and Varsol took to training monsters to emulate the now famous Armorian defenders, and the Empire wasted no time in outlawing the practice, which only served to embolden the would-be Wranglers. The long war with Armoria took its toll upon the Empire, both in terms of its inability to capture the much smaller nation and in the numerous rebellions and uprisings that continually sprang up across its holdings. One cold winter morning in 381 CR, conspirators staged a coup in Ruma, infiltrating the headquarters. In this battle, both conspirators and loyalists died. Nonetheless, in an instant, the Empire's upper leadership had been annihilated. The surviving politicians and military leaders grasped at the frayed strings of power, issuing panicked and often contradictory orders in an attempt to seize control of the Empire and rein in the chaos, but it was too late. The leaders of Barsoul, realizing an opportunity when they saw it, announced their independence from the Empire the following spring, and pledged their support to the Revaran people, further adding fuel to the fires of rebellion. Because during this time of upheavals, Revara had risen. A few of the more clever aristocrats escaped to the south, into the desert towns of Sargaros. There they drew upon the goodwill of the Sargarosan people and set themselves up as a government in exile. Over the next few years, the political situation more or less settled into something resembling that of the current day. The island of Majul became part of Revara, and despite some grumbling from those who wanted a capital on the mainland, Ruma was named the capital of the reborn nation due to its size and existing infrastructure. The current year is 752, some 70 years after the fall of the Majul Empire. The legacy of the Great War against the Majul still remains, not just in the political leanings and relationships between the various nations of the Chosu region, but also in the popularity of monster battling that has endured to the current day. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part, we are going to talk about the modern situation of the setting. I really like this history. It's logical, but at the same time, it sets a solid foundation when it comes to monster wrangling. You can see how this activity has continued in present times because it is part of the history of the revolution, of the fight for freedom when it comes to the whole Majul Empire conflict. Thank you for watching this part of the review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.